So this is series 3 of Why Jesus Came, the first session of that. And last week we were looking at just how well the people of God managed to live as God's people in the land that he'd given them. God had made a covenant with them at Mount Sinai that he would be their God and they would be his chosen people. He promised to live amongst them, but for a holy God to live amongst a disobedient people, there had to be a way of dealing with that disobedience. And so the sacrifice of animals was introduced to pay for sin. And this was the pattern of the tabernacle worship. And later when they were in the promised land and built a permanent temple, it was the same pattern of worship. As well as that, God had given Moses instructions on how the people were to live. Now, the short snippets of history that we looked at last week showed that the people went from a heartfelt commitment to God to downright disobedience. But God never gave up on his people. He sent prophets to call them back. There were reform movements by some of the kings, and we have the story of King Josiah, who was the king of Judah, the southern kingdom, and he was refurbishing the temple, or having it done, and the workers found a book of the law, a copy of the book of the law. And they took it to Josiah, and it was read to him, and it says that when he heard it, he cried and he tore his clothes because he realised just how far they'd strayed from God. He had it read to the whole assembly of the people and again made a covenant to be obedient to God. And then Josiah set about ridding the whole land of altars to Baal and any worship of any other gods that weren't God. But he ruled for 31 years, and then we read his son Jehoiakim and his son after him, Jehoiakim. It says they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And so eventually God allowed Babylon to come in and overrun Jerusalem and take the people into exile. But again, God did not give up on his people or his plan. Persia conquered Babylon, and Cyrus, the king of Persia, was used by God to return the exiles to their land and to rebuild the temple. Isaiah 43:13 says, I will raise up Cyrus in my righteousness. I will make all his ways straight. He will rebuild my city. Because God can use whoever he chooses for his purposes. So the history of God's people was making commitment, then falling away. Being called back, falling away. Being brought back again, and so it went, almost cyclic. We see the suffering at the hands of other nations when they were disobedient and caused God to withdraw his protection. And then we see how God's mercy restored them. By the time of Jesus, the Jewish people were very committed to being obedient, to the point where the Pharisees, who dedicated their lives to obeying the laws, took that to extreme, to the point that they would tithe, that is to give 1/10 of their herb garden to God. But in their commitment, they seem to have lost sight of their purpose of being different from the nations around them. And rather than showing other nations what God wanted, they had withdrawn into themselves and separated themselves off. So this raises the question for me, how am I doing at showing God to the people around me? Have I got sucked in and joined in what everyone else is doing, even if it's ungodly? Have I once made a great commitment to God but have let that slip? Do I cut myself off from others, live in my own pious little world? You see, we too are God's people, and our purpose too is to display God to the world.
Oh, the mercy of God, the glory of grace, that he chose to redeem us, to forgive and restore, and you call us your children, chosen in him, to be holy and blameless, to the glory of God, to the praise of his glory and grace. richness of grace, the depths of His love. In Him is redemption, the forgiveness of sin. You called us as righteous, predestined in Him, for the praise of His glory, included in Christ, to the praise of His glorious grace, to the praise of His glory and power. To Him be all glory, honor and praise, forever and ever and ever. Amen. Oh, the glory of grace expressed in His Son, His image and likeness revealed to